This is example 1 of 3 for task 4A, a contrast-focused analysis. The arguments in this example both have definite conclusions, but said conclusions oppose each other. In a video focused on a comparison-focused analysis, I explained what I mean by conclusions that oppose each other. The word count for the analytical paragraph only is 328. So again, the analytical paragraph is the one where you make a claim about similarity and difference, offer support from the arguments, and then offer support that your evidence does support what you have in your first sentence. Performance, very good to outstanding. The grade or score would be 87 to 92.5 points. I'm not going to go over all of this again. I went over this in a previous video when going over examples for comparison-focused analysis. It does help when you're working through these examples to read the original arguments because that really trains your brain and helps your brain warm up to what it's going to be doing. So by reading original arguments, original sets of arguments, and then how they were discussed, that is really firing up, maybe even creating some new white cells in your brain on the way to creating new neural pathways necessary to effectively execute the intellectual moves required of this kind of writing assignment. Let's go ahead and look at the example. I assume that you have read these two arguments. And remember that each of the examples for each set of arguments that I'm using for the examples is just an example. What each example shows is that the basic minimum criteria are being met. These examples also happen to excel because I wanted to show you mostly A-level examples, but I could have taken different approaches with respect to any set of arguments. Now that doesn't mean you can say anything about any set of arguments, but I'm just saying there's not necessarily just one answer in terms of how you execute the template and the requirements for the discussion, the objective analytical paragraph. So let's go ahead and look at this one. I would like to support the claim that there's a major difference with respect to our reasoning. So here we have another example of how you can start your paragraph per the instructions in the step 1 download. As cited in my discussion of a similarity. Okay, so this is an oversight on my part. It used to be that I had students write a comparative paragraph and then a contrast-focused paragraph. And I decided I would rather students focus just on either a comparison or a contrast to really concentrate and focus in on mastering the overall expectations for the paragraph rather than spreading themselves thinner over 2 paragraphs. So I forgot to edit this part. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to cross this out. So let me do this. Okay, so I'm not telling you to cross it out. I'm just saying I made a mistake. I forgot to edit that out. So here I could just have, I note how there have been various test studies and experiments that have tried to prove claims to be true, but the results are almost always inconclusive. Notice the 3 dots that I have here in the middle of the quoted claim. Some of you may know what the dots are for, some of you may not, but sometimes it doesn't always make sense to include every single thing in a student claim. It could be that their sentence is clunky or that they have interrupters, and so I was able to take out some words and still the statement made sense. It might even be a better statement, but I just retrieved the information that I needed from the statement. And so I put the 3 dots in there to signify that I did omit some words. Now, if you do this, you have to do it in such a way that you do not misrepresent or distort the original claim. So that is very important. A new statement I wish to focus on from your response. So again, this example is from when I used to have students do a first comparative paragraph. So in this particular example that I forgot to change, they are reusing a statement they used for their comparative paragraph, and now they're adding a new statement for the contrast paragraph. But you guys don't have to do 2 paragraphs, so I'm going to take that out. So I'm going to just take, we'll just take out the word a statement. That should fix the problem, correct the issue, update the example. A statement I wish to focus on from your response, which you present immediately after your definition reasons, is as follows. It is possible to set up experiments and complete research to determine the validity of each conflicting claim about wearing masks. So one thing I want to warn you guys about is that you know that this is step 3A right here. And then, providing the textual evidence is step 3C. So let me go ahead and highlight that the way I've been highlighting it. Your quoted evidence needs to come at the very beginning of your paragraph. Sometimes students will quote something over here or over here. Now, it could be, if for some reason we come across an example where I have the other quoted sentence over here, I would be really surprised. Just be careful how much you add to an introduction when you are setting up your intro or transitioning to your quoted evidence. So here they do have a very long introduction, and they give a little bit of context for the quote that they're about to give from their peer, and that's okay. Just be careful not to start discussing too much before you've presented both of the quoted pieces of text from each argument. All right, so now, again, take note. Look at how much of the paragraph of an A-level or a B+ A-level response is discussion-oriented, right? So we would say maybe this is 25% is step 3A and 3B from the step 1 document, and then 75% of the paragraph should be you interpreting, drawing inferences, drawing conclusions, arguing for the claims that you have in blue, the implied claim in blue, that this is evidence for what you're claiming in green. So then the speaker or writer goes on to say, later in your argument, you flesh out that this possibility is within the realm of science. Via evidence, one can use an argument to establish the truth of a claim. That is, when it comes to mask wearing and the virus. So notice how they're putting quotation marks around words instead of quoting the entire statement, because you're really only supposed to quote one statement. Maybe later you can quote a significant portion of a statement or whatnot. But here they're doing a really good job of trying not to quote more than one statement. What they do is they paraphrase a little bit. They're bringing in the context of their argument for which they have quoted their peer. And they're saying, here are some words that you use. And they're calling attention to these words as words that are the topic of the claim itself that is in this sentence. So then they go on to say, as such. So they're drawing a conclusion, an inference, using college-level reading and comprehension skills. As such, the language and tone of your reasoning shows you are confident and optimistic that science can prove a given claim about mask wearing is true. All right, so they pull out more evidence, right? Let's see, I want to double check something. Okay, so they pull out more evidence, words, right? They don't just randomly pick out these words from the argument of their peer, okay? Rather, they pick out words from the broader scope of their reasoning that connect to what they quoted from their peer. And then they offer what? An interpretation right here, from as such to is true. They offer an interpretation, an analysis that is an interpretation of what is going on here with respect to the quoted claim here in their peer's reasoning. Then they say, note how I talk about the results of tests, studies, and experience being almost always conclusive. Okay, so they are pulling from here. And remember, one thing that I've iterated in all of the example videos and even the step 1, the first video for the step, is that you have to really unpack the quotes. That might mean that you have to drill into words that name fundamental, powerful concepts within the quoted material, that you need to re-quote phrases within the quotes, or that you need to pull in and connect to other words that name fundamental and powerful ideas in the argument as a whole that you're talking about. So this is a nice transition here. Note how I talk about the results. Okay, so I already read that. Going on to at least implicitly point out that developments in reality have called into questions claims made in light of previous research, studies, tests, and experiments. Okay, so here you can see that they're acknowledging that, look, I'm giving you an interpretation of something I said, of something that I quoted from my evidence. So they're unpacking the evidence. First, they unpack the evidence from their peer. Now they're unpacking the evidence in blue with respect to their own ideas, and they're offering an interpretation. They're not just merely repeating what they said. They're adding to our insights and understanding, to the reader's insight and understanding as to what's going on with their reasoning. Again, here they go. Now they're going to draw a conclusion, right, based on college level reading and interpretation skills, something from their interpretation, something from what they are talking about with respect to their quoted claim and their argument as a whole. They say, as such, I argue that the language and tone of my reasoning shows that I have some doubt or at least call into question the ability of science to prove which claims about mask wearing are true. And really, that should be more like that. Okay, so notice here when they say, I argue. Here they're not talking about the argument that they wrote back during Unit 1. They're saying, right now I'm arguing. I want to make the claim. In other words, they're talking about the argument that is this paragraph about a contrast and that the evidence reveals and proves that, or at least makes a compelling case for what is in green. To the extent that my argument does show attention to scientific inquiry, I am further led to believe the following. So this is at least a minor conclusion in their argument about the arguments. And then they say led to believe the following. So they're drawing yet another minor conclusion about the arguments. While my reasoning appears to reflect, appears is a great word to use. It's called, that's another example of what I've referred to as a hedge in other examples. You use it when just to show that you could be wrong, but you still might go on to make your statement because you at least have reasons to believe what you're about to state. While my reasoning appears to reflect some form of epistemological skepticism, your reasoning appears to reflect epistemological empiricism. This is very cool. Now, I had lectured on this earlier with another example that it might be possible to pull in I haven't lectured about pulling in material, I don't think, from the reading, but this is a great example. They are pulling in their knowledge from the Smart Book reading that they were tested over in theory, right? So just make sure that if you make claims like this, like you say, hey, I think my peer reflects libertarianism, and or that it could be that you're undecided. So you could even say, it seems like you reflect either libertarianism or compatibilism. I'm not sure, but you definitely seem to think, that there's free will and responsibility, but I need to know more. So you can say something like that. Or you might look at their reasoning and what's implied and the terms that they use and say, wow, you're really a hard determinist. But of course, you want to provide evidence for that. And so they're not just randomly deciding to talk about, to argue that or to claim that, right? One reflects skepticism and one reflects empiricism. This is following from, right? They say, I am led to believe, right? So in other words, their claims about their views in which theories they seem to align with is based on the analysis done here with respect to the evidence and their arguments as a whole. Okay, so just make sure that if you do something like this, that you do not misrepresent or distort the theory. One thing to think about is that I have you first do the reading about a branch and the ideas, the questions, the problems, the theories, the thinkers. Then I have you take a test. And the idea there is to help you see how much you know or don't know, whether it's at a deep level or superficial level. At least you get some idea of what you really have internalized about a topic or not. And then you do the writing assignment in light of all that intellectual prep. Okay, so given that we learned these two theories have different views about the origins, nature, and possibility of knowledge, this is very cool. So they bring in the name of of the branch with epistemological to define what they mean by skepticism and empiricism, and then they name the core concept of knowledge. They show that they understand the context for which this assignment is being completed. So they know that they have read their Smart Book reading on epistemology, they took a test on it, and now they're bringing in some of what they learned, and they're bringing up key terms, names of the branches, and names of the relevant branch for this particular topic. So just keep that in mind. And by the way, this example will be used for other possible topics and branches of philosophy. It's just that I created these videos initially for when we're focusing on metaphysics and free will. But what I generally said still applies to when you're doing an analytical paragraph with respect to anything in a reading, with respect to anything within a particular branch. Okay, so they're drawing yet another conclusion here. It is no surprise that we have opposing conclusions on the respective topic in the context of mask wearing and the spread of COVID-19. So I would probably give this an 87.5 to 90. The way it would become a 90 to 100 is if they added some information about what the skeptic's take is on knowledge. So what is the main conclusion of the skeptic and why? What's like a main reason that the skeptic has the conclusion that they do about knowledge? And the same thing with respect to empiricism. They could even add a quote from the book, just one line for skepticism, one line for empiricism, and that would have brought this answer probably to 100. It would have just made the logic that much more tight and coherent and compelling.